Good morning, everybody. Good morning. Thank you all for coming today. We're real excited to be hosting the first Kentucky Sustainable Business Council meeting. I'm Bobby Clark. I'm pleased to serve as director of the Kentucky Sustainable Business Council. I'm also co-founder of Midwest Clean Energy and president of Sustainable Business Ventures. We will, just to give you kind of an overview of today, we will have a little bit of Q&A with our speakers, but during our lunch, we will dive more deeply into that. We do have on our tables, if not, we have a survey that we want each of you, if you would, to complete before we go, or before you go, because it asks what areas of interest are you interested in helping this organization grow and launch. So, our first speaker is Heather Warman. Heather is Executive Director of the Kentucky Environmental Foundation since January of 2014, and she has been a proponent of green building initiatives in Kentucky since 2000. Prior to the Kentucky Environmental Foundation, she was actively involved in all areas of nonprofit management with the American Red Cross, Habitat for Humanity. Heather is highly knowledgeable and speaks regularly on topics such as green building, sustainable design, recycling, reuse, and more. She has served on the board of directors of the Home Builders Association, was chair of the HBA Green Council, and in 2012 was chair of the Midwest Energy Conference. She currently serves on the Education Committee liaison for the U.S. Green Building Council. Heather?
Good morning. It is so exciting to see all of you here today. We are thrilled with the turnout. There is a special announcement that needs to be made, and so before I even talk, I'm going to let, I already forgot her name, I'm so sorry. We just met only 30 seconds ago, but it's a pretty important announcement, so I'm going to give Mr. Hollander, is that correct, the stage. Yep.
Thank you. I'm Bill Hollander, and I was delighted to be here today to hear your activities and look forward to following. I'm going to be leaving a little bit early this morning. I'm a new Metro Councilman on the old Metro Council, and we are all sad to learn that the president of the council passed away overnight, President King, and so there is a memorial at City Hall at 11 o'clock, and I'll be attending that. So I wanted to announce that, and I hope you will all keep President King's family in your thoughts and prayers. Thank you.
So we don't like to start the meeting out that way, but I did want everyone to know, and I certainly wanted everyone to know why he was leaving. So, again, thank you all for coming. This is the first meeting for the Kentucky Sustainable Business Council. This group is being created to give a presence to businesses in Kentucky for advocacy on sustainable policy throughout the state. So we are excited to see many business owners we've already met with here, and we know are doing great things. We've located an office here in Louisville in this building, and later, after the meeting is over, there is a small space in the back called C-Space. It has been created as a nonprofit shared office space for people in the community. It's very low cost, and as you can see, very beautiful. You have access to these training rooms and boardrooms and conference rooms when you have an office here. So we have been blessed to share space with them here at such a low cost that we can have this beautiful office and have meetings like this and get this organization started. Frank Knapp is here with us today as well. Frank is the co-founder of the Small Business Chamber of Commerce since February of 2000. He served as president and CEO of the 5,000 plus member statewide advocacy organization that has taken a leadership role in making South Carolina more small business friendly. Mr. Knapp serves on the advisory board for the South Carolina Small Business Development Center and was recognized by the Small Business Administration as the 2014 South Carolina Small Business Financing Advocate of the Year. He serves as the co-chair for the American Sustainable Business Council Action Fund. And Mr. Knapp is also the president of the Knapp Agency, a full-service advertising public relations firm that he founded in 1991 in Columbia, South Carolina. For 23 years, he has provided marketing service to locally owned businesses. He holds a master's degree in social psychology from the University of South Carolina and a bachelor's degree in psychology from Indiana University of Pennsylvania. And he's here to talk to us today about how these things get started and how to make them work.
We're actually going to have Frank wait because we want to get Senator McGarvey in. He's got a deadline. So after Senator McGarvey, assuming the congressman doesn't show up before he does, we will have Frank come up and talk and will be part of our luncheon facilitation. I am pleased to introduce Senator Dave Morgan. Senator Morgan McGarvey. I keep messing up your name because I knew a David Morgan, and I try to substitute that. He is the state senator from the 19th district in Louisville. Before serving in the Kentucky Senate, he worked for Jack Conway when he was Attorney General as an assistant Attorney General. He's worked for Congressman Ben Chandler in the law firm of Frost, Brown and Todd. Senator McGarvey has served in the Kentucky General Assembly since 2012. He's a member of the Appropriations and Revenue Committee, the Banking and Insurance Committee, the Budget Review Committee on Human Resource and State and Local Government. Senator McGarvey is a Louisville native, earned his bachelor's degree in journalism at the University of Missouri, and his Juris Doctorate degree from the University of Kentucky College of Law. It gives me pleasure to introduce Senator McGarvey. He told me to call him Morgan.
You call me David, which is good. And they actually sent out a little email that said Senator David McGarvey, which has caused some fun in my house. My brother's name is David. He very much appreciates the upgrade. And, as he told me, he said, I didn't have to do anything to become a senator. I appreciate you guys having me here today. I want to talk a little bit about net metering. I'm assuming with this, does anybody not know what net metering is?
Don't be shy. Yeah.
Rob, I know you know what it is. So basically, when we talk about net metering, we have a law in Kentucky right now that allows basically residential customers, that's all it is, to allow 30 kilowatts of power for net metering. So if you have solar panels on your house, you can get credit for the power that you generate. With it being such a low threshold, essentially what that means is no commercial business. There's no commercial application for renewable sources of energy right now. There's no incentive, at least for businesses, to get involved with renewable sources of energy. So what we'd like to do is sort of a first and preliminary step in Kentucky. We'd like to increase the capacity for net metering here in the state. Now to me, this is a no-brainer. That doesn't guarantee its passage in Frankfurt, however. And so what we're doing right now, and in this session, we're going to be I'm going to be proposing legislation, hopefully. We brought people together to say, okay, how can we increase the capacity for net metering? So businesses, and when you think about businesses, don't just think about your business, think about some of the public applications. And wouldn't it be awesome if one of our elementary schools had solar panels all across the roof of their flat gymnasium, and then we were saving money eventually as taxpayers? Wouldn't it be great if our universities could have a residence hall powered by renewable energy? We can't do that right now because of the limit we have. Now that's not to say that this thing's going to take off. What we have to do is we first have to lay the groundwork. We have to give people this ability. That's going to incentivize them to do it. And then, look, I don't think that every business in Kentucky is going to have solar power or some type of renewable energy source within the next year. But I think we start to build on it. And when we start to build on it, what happens? It starts to work. You drive through the carpool line at school and you see that the building's powered, and your kids come out and say, hey, this is how we're powering the building. And you say, hey, that's not a bad idea. That starts to work. It starts to catch on. That's not to say that I think all of Kentucky is going to be powered by renewable energy in the next 10 years, but it's a start, and it's a good way to start. So that's kind of what we're working on right now, and we're working with all interested parties. So we're working with the people that manufacture solar panels, we're working with people that just have an interest in making sort of the earth a cleaner and better place. We're working with the power companies. They have a stake in this too. And so I think one of the problems that we're running into in drafting this legislation is, okay, we want to have this net metering capacity, but how do you actually measure the cost savings from having renewable energy? Because the power companies are saying, and they have a valid point, hey, look, if you're going to have a building, you're going to have renewable energy on your house, but you're not completely off the grid, we still have fixed costs. The wires still cost as much as they do. The generation of power still costs the same amount. So how do we actually credit those costs? So it's not just as simple or little as saying, we want to increase this capacity. It's how we're going to increase that capacity and how we're also going to handle the people who are already in under the current system. So those are kind of the questions we're looking to answer right now. That's why a bill hasn't been filed already. It'd be really simple just to say, here's the bill. But we want a bill that'll pass because this is about progress. It's funny when you get in politics, you hear all the slogans, right? You guys have watched campaigns, you've watched election season. What's one of the biggest messages that you see in a campaign season? Democrat or Republican? What does everybody say they want? They want to change. Right? They want to change. They want to change. Then you get government and realize you don't really want change. But what I do think they want is incremental improvement. That doesn't look as sexy on a bumper sticker, you know. McGarvey, I'm for incremental improvement. Doesn't sell as well. But that's how I kind of view the net metering bill. How can we get everybody to the table, all the interested stakeholders, and say, and I think actually the power companies are coming around to us, whether it's because of national regulations or because of good-heartedness, that's not for me to say. But I think that people are saying, okay, what's a new way we can do this? And how can we do it? And so we lay the groundwork for Kentucky in a way it'll work. For instance, you know, in Arizona right now, they passed a law that has a lot of really good renewable components to it. In practice, it's not working as well as they wanted it to. They have to go back to the drawing board. So we want to try and get this right the first time with an eye towards, you know, where do we want to be as a state, not just 5 years from now, where do we want to be as a state 20 years from now? Get that first, you know, stone laid and then build upon it. So that's kind of what we're looking at with the net metering bill. And, you know, it's not very complicated, but it's got some elements to it. So yeah, I'm happy to take questions from anybody sort of regarding this topic, climate in Frankfurt. Anybody have any questions? Sure.
What do you need from this group? What can we do?
I think interest and support. And I say interest first of all because, like I said, it seems like a simple bill, and it's a great idea, and it's a no-brainer, but we need to get it right. And so, you know, look over these things, not just with oh yes, I want to do that. Make sure, you know, you look at it and become interested in it. And then I think if you have a business, if you have, you know, I see my friends from TARC here, if you have an interest in sort of the process of how you could use renewable energy and how it would be cost effective for all of us, you know, that's something that we need to know as lawmakers. One of the things I've learned in Frankfurt, getting up there, is sometimes how little you know about something. I certainly didn't know about all the kilowatt rates and all the sort of energy policy that went into net metering, and I'm trying to learn, and I've learned from a bunch of people in this room. You know, so don't just assume that legislators know everything about this issue. So become interested and then become supportive. Please, you cannot underestimate how effective it is to call one of us. I'm not going to embarrass anybody here, but aside from a foreign email, how many people in this room have personally called their legislators? So, you know, that's a better number than you get in most rooms, a much better number than you get in most rooms. But, you know, if you call, or especially those of us of a certain age in the legislature, if you send us an email, you know, we don't have staff. We really don't. You know, if you send me an email, it comes to me. It comes to my phone. I'm the one that reads it. So you cannot underestimate how effective that personal contact is.
What objections do you anticipate in Frankfurt?
Two objections. Good question. Right here, he said, what objections do we anticipate in Frankfurt? I say two objections, probably a little general. One is the cost. I mean, the power companies are legitimately concerned about the cost. And I say the power companies, there's two types of power companies, for those of you sort of familiar with it. There's what we call the co-ops, which are owned by all the users, and then the investor-owned utilities, like an LG or a KU. Like I said, they have costs. The way we regulate our power companies, they're sort of guaranteed a rate of return from the Public Service Commission. And what they don't want to do, and I understand this, I'm just telling you like it is, not making any editorial judgments here at all. What they say is these are our costs. It costs this much to have this many feet of wire. It costs this much to generate this much power. It costs this much to be hooked up to somebody's house. And we have those costs regardless of what they're doing with renewable energy. And because we are guaranteed to make a certain rate of return by the Public Service Commission, we don't want people right now with means who can afford to put solar panels and renewable energy sources in. We don't want the people who don't have as much money in certain parts of town or certain parts of Kentucky to subsidize their getting solar panels, because it's going to be passed off to the ratepayers. When you think about it as a utility, right, they have one source of revenue. It's every time each one of us turns on a light switch. That's it. That's their source of revenue. They can't go out and find new customers. They can't, sell a different product necessarily. So that's their concern is the cost. The other concern in Frankfurt is kind of one of those things that right now looms large over the legislature is the coal industry. The coal industry decides that this is a threat to their production, then it's going to be unlikely to pass. Boss.
Three of the largest investor-owned utilities in Kentucky, who of course have been out these service areas, have proposed very large increases in their flat monthly fixed charge to residential customers and increasing the demand charge for commercial customers. And this, of course, creates an economic barrier for people who might be interested in investing in rooftop solar. Have you heard about this, and do you have a comment on it?
Sure, and that's the not to have any type of cop-out answer. That all goes before the PSC. We don't legislate the power rates at all in Kentucky, and I don't know. I'll look into it. I don't think we have the authority to legislate what a power company charges. That's one of those things where, again, they're an investor-owned utility. They're guaranteed a certain rate of return under the law. I don't know the intricacies of what they've proposed or why they're proposing it. But again, I've sat down at a table with people in this very room, members of the environmental community and members of the power companies all at the same table to try and get this particular piece of legislation passed.
I think it's one of the stories we have to tell as well this whole process is the job creation piece. I mean, I've got a vested interest. I'm in the solar business. We employ roofers, we employ electricians, and I think there is a job creation potential that has been capped as part of net metering. Look, many businesses in Kentucky try to get built out. So that's something we should look at and use as a weapon in our arsenal.
Thank you. And of course, when you make these talks, you always leave something out, and usually it is something really important. And so I totally glossed over it. Nobody heard that. That is definitely a huge piece of this. Not just the jobs we can create by putting in solar panels, by using renewable energy, but I mean, there are jobs we are losing in the coal industry and other places where these are workers who can be trained to do something else. And so it's not just a job creation, it can also be a job replacement, which is another way to look at it as well. Very important piece of it. Thank you.
Do you see any ability for this bill or other renewable energy bills to be bipartisan? Is there a Republican base of senators and House members supporting that?
Yeah, so his question, to make sure everybody heard it, was, do you see a bipartisan basis for this bill? The short answer is, interestingly enough, in Frankfurt right now, the only way something passes is if it's with bipartisan support. I hate talking about the politics of all this stuff because I'd rather focus on policy. But to look at the politics for a minute, our House of Representatives is controlled by Democrats. Our Senate is heavily controlled by Republicans. I'm a Democrat, and by me being here today, you have about 10% of the Democratic caucus. So, when I say it's heavily controlled by Republicans, it's heavily controlled by Republicans. So you're not going to get something through the legislature unless it has bipartisan support. And that's why, when we're trying to do this, we're trying to get everybody who has an interest at the table, even including some of the coal folks, to the table on this bill. Because otherwise, we should just go ahead and file a bill, understand it's not going to get a committee hearing, and talk about it some more. So that's kind of what we're doing.
It's a combination question suggestion. There's another major initiative underway that impacts net metering. Combined heat power is an effort that DD and a number of other agencies are looking at for combined heat power help to be successful. It too requires net metering in order to integrate your efforts with that effort.
So he talked about combined heat power and the net metering. In fact, we need to have net metering, an increase in net metering capacity for combined heat power. Something that we've talked about a little bit, and I'm certainly learning about. And hopefully, if we get what we're pushing for, hopefully the net metering capacity will be pushed high enough to accommodate that.
We're in the early stages of initiating some proposals for Fayette County. And I guess my question to you, do you believe that it would support efforts in Frankfurt if there were local success stories that Frankfurt could point to?
Absolutely. The question was, do you think it would help in Frankfurt if we had local success stories we could point to? Without question. And to me, what we need to do to make this a viable option in Frankfurt is we need to show local success stories, because that does two things. It shows, one, that it works. It shows, two, that there's a desire for it. You know, I think one thing that you see in Frankfurt right now is people aren't really opposed to this. And Randy, I know you've been at some of the meetings. Rob, I know you've been at some of the meetings. Jacob, I know you've been there as well. There's not a strong opposition to this, either behind closed doors or in public, to at least the concept of it. Devil's always in the details, but at least the concept of it, there's not a strong opposition. What there is a question for publicly and privately is, okay, if we do this, is anybody going to use it? And even right now, when you look at the net metering law we have, in the past, I think, somebody correct me, in 2008, is when we passed the current net metering law that we've got, that allows the 30 kilowatts. We're nowhere close to the capacity of what that bill allows. At least from a residential standpoint, right? The residential allows a certain percentage of power to come from this net metering renewable sources across the grid. 1%, yeah, less than 1% around there. And we have not met that threshold. So when we talk about this, there are some people saying, sure, we're for this, but if we do it, who's going to use it? So I think that's one where success stories, where people saying, yes, we want this, would be helpful.
I think that's where we can help you, because we've been literally going to lay out the list of, these people will to run themselves out and over that for living, and that's one of our great devices.
That's great. That's great. So he was just talking about providing examples of people that have walked away because they can't do it because of the current limits.
Hi, I'm Robbie from USDA Rural Development, and we have programs for renewable energy and energy efficiency. And my friend here wanted a question. Do you know what bill number that was for net metering that passed in 2008? The bill number? Okay, we can look that up.
Not off the top of my head, I'm sorry.
Is there what? Is there a new bill now or a new bill?
It's going to be
We've not filed a new bill
Okay.
this session yet, but
And
we're close.
I guess my question is because of my work, not only is net metering, I think, important, but a lot of the cooperatives, especially in the TVA area, is going to generation. Is there something where you also, I don't know, maybe be able to include something for not only net metering, but generation? And I know if you need success stories, USDA Rural Development and Governor's Office of Ag Policy has plenty of success stories for renewable energy or energy efficiency for you.
Well, and I appreciate that. Did everybody hear her? You actually stumbled upon, I said I didn't want to talk too much about the politics of it. No, it's okay, but that's the reality of it, right? There's policy and there's politics, and there's sort of, people talk about politics always in the pejorative, but my wife works in corporate America. I've never seen more politics than when she goes to work in the morning. It exists everywhere among us. I would say that of the politics of this bill, probably the investor-owned utilities are more cooperative right now than the co-ops. If there is a stumbling block, it's probably the co-ops are a little bit more worried about how this is going to affect their business model.
Yeah,
so that would be helpful.
A conversation I've had with one RECC is that, like for generation, they have to buy their power, so they don't care if they buy it from you, me, or the coal company.
Right.
The TVA co-ops are totally different world.
Yeah, exactly. And
So they support it.
yeah,
Others
I
don't.
totally agree.
I don't want to
I want
cut
to
this.
answer this really quick. Under the Public Utility Regulatory Policy Act, a federal act, utilities are required to buy renewable energy from customers. And so a lot of the utilities, the large utilities like KU, LG&E, they have a small generation tariff, and that's what that would fit in. It's a wholesale rate. It's their avoided cost. It's 4 or 5 cents per kilowatt hour, but that is already on the books.
I appreciate it. They're very kind. I have to go take someone's deposition this morning. While I'm ready, so I would much rather be here. So would they probably. Randy, you correct me if I'm wrong. One of the things we're also running into now, there's a couple of different issues sort of percolating out there. One, LG&E is looking to create 10 megawatt solar array down in Bowling Green. The other piece is what's
Mercer County.
Mercer County. And then the other side of it is what's going to happen nationally, sort of. And one of the things that we're looking at increasing net metering capacity. I don't think the investor-owns, at least, and maybe the co-ops as well, would have a problem buying credits from individuals if they're required to buy credits. But right now, they don't know exactly where that's going to end up. But something that, again, is why we're all sitting at the same table. And the people in this room, and I look around and I see several of us, probably 5 or 6 people who've been in these meetings along the way, maybe more. There is at least a healthy discussion going on right now, and that's where you all can help, is to continue to show the need, the demand, the support for what we're trying to do here. So thank you all for having us.
We are going to move on to our next speaker. So proud to introduce U.S. Representative John Yarmuth, who represents Kentucky's 3rd Congressional District. He is in his 4th term. He's been appointed to the Committee on Energy and Commerce, the Committee on Budget, on which he is the 2nd ranking Democrat. He has been recognized for his work to improve education, revitalize manufacturing in Louisville, and advance economic security for American families. For the 113th Congress, Congressman Yarmuth is focused on strengthening our economy for working families and the middle class, reducing the influence of special interests on our elections, and enacting comprehensive immigration reform legislation. After 4 years as a congressional leader on the Affordable Care Act, Congressman Yarmuth is continuing his efforts to ensure that every Louisvillian realizes the full benefits of health care reform. Born and raised in Louisville, Congressman Yarmuth graduated from Atherton High School, where he served as student government president. He went on to earn his degree in American Studies at Yale University. He and his wife, Kathy, have one son, Aaron, who graduated from Indiana University in 2006 and obtained his master's degree from American University. Here, welcome, Congressman Yarmuth.
Well, good morning. Now that you heard the story of my life, that's actually the old bio.
Oh, is it?
This is not your fault. That's our fault. Most everything in there is accurate. I still graduated from Atherton. But the most important thing I would add is that my son Aaron now owns Leo, the paper that I found. I'm real proud of that. It wasn't my idea, but I'm proud of him for wanting to do that, and I think he's doing real well with the paper. So anyway, that's exciting for our family. So you really want to hear about Congress, huh? Well, we're barely a week into the 114th Congress, and I will say that there are not many optimistic signs in the first week. I do have some hope for a more productive Congress. The last 2 Congresses have been among the least productive Congresses in history. Productive in the sense of actual laws enacted. Some people think that's a good thing. Some people think it's a bad thing. But it wasn't for lack of trying in both bodies. The House passed several hundred bills that the Senate never took up. The Senate passed some bills the House never took up. And if this week is any indication, it's probably not going to be too much better. But I'll kind of elaborate on all that and then talk about some other things that are on my mind and that affect, I think, should affect Congress, and then we can have a good conversation. By the way, how long do I have?
30 minutes, 45 minutes.
Okay, great. Okay, here's what's been happening, and yesterday was a perfect example. Those of you, if you may have been following what's been going on, last year, at the end of last year, we passed a funding bill to fund the government through the end of this fiscal year, which ends September 30th. We passed for every department of government except one, and that was the Department of Homeland Security. And that was given what's called a continuing resolution, temporary funding through February 27th. The reason Republicans did that was they wanted to essentially have some vehicle to try and undo the president's executive action on immigration. So this week they took up a funding bill. The funding part of it perfectly acceptable, bipartisan support, good bill, right kind of investments in the right places for the Department of Homeland Security. But then they started adding policy riders regarding immigration. One of them was to directly related to the president's action, essentially saying that no money can be spent to essentially grant legal status to about 5 million undocumented immigrants. But then they went even further and they defunded the DREAMER program. It's called DACA, Deferred Action for Childhood Arrivals. These are the kids who came to the country, were brought by their parents, involuntarily. Obviously, they've grown up here. This is the only country they've ever known. The president had some executive action expanding the DREAMER program last year. So this one would basically say, we're going to now deport every one of these kids. It's about as extreme a measure as is possible to pass. It barely passed that provision, but it passed. That bill's never going to pass the Senate. It'll never get 60 votes. Well, it probably won't even get a majority of votes because there are a number of Republicans on the Senate side said they aren't going to vote for it. The president would veto it. If it passed, it would never be overridden. This is what's been going on now for 4 years. Whenever, and I'm going to be highly partisan here, so anybody shoot back, any Republicans who want to defend the party will have an opportunity to do that. This is what's happened for 4 years in the House. Every time they dealt with a subject, they passed a version of an approach that had no chance of passing the Senate. A perfect example was, I'm on the Energy and Commerce Committee, which has jurisdiction over energy and environmental matters. There was a bill that Ed Whitfield introduced, Congressman from Kentucky, who's chairman of the subcommittee. And it basically prohibited the EPA from implementing certain portions of the Clean Air Act. And what it was aimed at combating the president's directives on the EPA's, not that these weren't the president's, but he supports them. The EPA's actions on power plant emissions. That's how they got at it. Now, in 2008, there was a bill introduced that dealt with the same thing, but in a much more rational way than just saying you can't enforce the Clean Air Act. And because it dealt with actually the question of technology advancements and when these rules could go into effect related to technology, and then made some investments in research for that. In 2008, when this bill was before the committee, Ed Whitfield, Fred Upton, who's chairman of the committee, Joe Barton, who has been a chairman of the overall committee, 8 members of the committee not only voted for it, that approach, but also made speeches in the committee hearing saying how rational this solution was, how it was a common sense solution. This is the way we ought to be approaching it. So this year, I introduced an amendment to that bill, which was essentially the 2008 bill, which they had all supported. And I read, when I presented the amendment, I read all their quotes from 2008. Well, they all voted against it. So they passed up an opportunity to take an approach that would have had bipartisan support that they used to support, instead passed an extreme measure that could never pass the Senate. That's what's been going on. It looks like that's what's going to continue to go on. But here's where I think there is hope. And now you're going to hear me say something nice about Mitch McConnell, which I'm not accustomed to doing. Now that Mitch is majority leader, the good thing about having Mitch McConnell, probably the only good thing about having Mitch McConnell as majority leader of the Senate at this time, is that Mitch is not ideological. Mitch doesn't have his own agenda, except to be majority leader. And now Mitch wants to develop his legacy, because he may only be majority leader for 2 years, and I think this was his lifetime ambition. He'll want to have a positive agenda, a legacy. It is very possible, because of the 60-vote rule in the Senate, meaning you have to get Democratic votes since Republicans only have 54, that there will be legislative approaches to some of the things that we need to do that originate in the Senate, that will come to the House, and Boehner will then marginalize his extreme right, and we'll get measures passed with Republican and Democrats in the House. Nothing that originates in the House will pass the Senate. That's my theory. But there is a chance that we can get some things coming to the other side. That's my optimistic scenario, and we'll see. Mitch is good. Again, I think Mitch wants to do the right thing, and we'll try to do the right thing. It's not going to be easy for him. Not going to be easy because he has to triangulate several different interests that are rarely in alignment. The White House, 24 members of his own caucus who are up for re-election in 2016, who are going to want to have votes on different things, not vote on certain things. Several presidential candidates who have their own agenda, including Rand Paul, and then House Republicans who are a different breed. So that's kind of the lay of the land. That's kind of the lay of the land, and it's going to be very interesting. We have the smallest contingent of Democrats, the smallest Democratic caucus in almost 100 years, and I thought it was lonely being the only Democrat in the federal delegation, but it's getting even lonelier just being a Democrat. As one commentator wrote recently, the Democrats in the House ought to just start popping the popcorn and sit back and watch the show, because we're basically not going to be playing a role. But we'll see. And the president's has been recently and is going to continue to be very aggressive in using executive actions, and that may make life interesting for us, both as whether we agree or not. Some of us are going to have to defend the White House in various areas, and so we will be the loyal opposition. There are a lot of things going on in Congress that are very frightening, particularly when you're dealing with from my perspective, environmental issues and the whole question of sustainability, and what the role of the federal government is or should be. And over the last few years, the federal government's been very active in a lot of fairly quiet ways, some not so quiet. Obviously, the power plant emission rules was a major move. Increasing CAFE standards for cars and trucks was a major move. There are a lot of tax provisions that I think have been very, very helpful in creating energy efficient appliances and actually moving jobs to the states from overseas. One of the most significant ones in terms of Louisville was that we had an energy efficient appliance. There is an energy efficient appliance tax credit. If you go out and buy an energy efficient appliance, you get a tax credit for buying it. We extended that to the manufacturer if that product was made in the United States. So you buy it, you get a tax credit. If the manufacturer builds that appliance in the United States, they get a tax credit for it. That was what made the difference when GE moved their line of hybrid water heaters from China to Appliance Park. Is that there actually was about an 8 to 10% economic difference between producing that in China, producing it here. And all things considered, 10,000-mile supply chain, damage and shipping, all of those things, plus labor. 8 to 10% different. This was a 7.5% tax credit. So it made the difference, and they brought 420 jobs back to Kentucky from China. And they used it also with a couple of other lines they brought. So there are a number of tax provisions like that that have been very helpful, I think, and productive. And unfortunately, this Congress has not been willing to extend them. And it was controversial for a lot of us when the wind power tax credit was not renewed by the last Congress, and I thought that was very damaging. Meanwhile, there are a lot of cool things going on out there, particularly in the energy field, and some of them are the result of the government support. Anytime you mention the Department of Energy's guaranteed loan program, part of the Recovery Act, the Those who didn't like it started screaming about Solyndra, the $500 million loan that the company went under, primarily because of competition from China. They had a great product that China was basically underselling. So that's $500 million, ended up being a bad deal. But there is deal after deal after deal out there, financed by that same program, that are turning out some wonderful, wonderful things. Example, there's a town of Hugoton, Kansas, town of 4,000, a company there that was doing biomass, using biomass and turning out ethanol. Got a $130 million loan from that program, built a facility, employed 300 people to build it, now employs 75 more, does about $5 to $6 million a year. And when they broke ground on that facility in October, who was standing there at the ribbon cutting? 2 Republican senators who voted against the program. That's like, that ad that appeared, that's just a politician thing. There's another company, and I think this is a fascinating story. There's another company out near Denver, and they had an idea. They've been working on how to do photovoltaic cells in a very, very consumer-friendly way that you could, a very flexible way. So they've been working on it. They got a $50 million loan out of that same program. Took them to the next level. They went from 50 employees to 150 employees. They perfected the product. They went to 600 employees. They got another round. They got a round of private financing. I think another $75 million. They sold the company to GE, for God knows how much. But they now have 600 employees. They'll have 2,000 employees. And what they make is like a saran wrap material that you can just roll off a roll. This photovoltaic cells, you can put it on your car, power all of the electronics in your car. You can use it in your house, and that's going to be marketed sometime soon. A very, very interesting product that came from that same government loan program. My favorite story is a company called Sirius Energy. It's SERIOUS. Well, it used to be called Sirius Materials. Some of you know this story. They developed a process, again, using Recovery Act funds through the State Department of Energy program to increase the insulating value of window panes from 2 to 3, R2 or 3, to R8 or 9. So triple or quadruple the insulating value of window panes. And so it's a recycling process. They got a contract to redo the Empire State Building. All the windows in the Empire State Building, 6,500 windows, 26,000 panes of glass. They took over the entire 5th floor. The Empire State Building turned it into their factory. So at night they'd go take the window panes out, work their magic, put them back in. It was an 18-month project that cost $20 million, and it pays for itself in 3 years. There's savings to the utility bill, and from henceforth, they will save 40 to 45% of the utility bill. So this company's doing this in schools and large industrial places. Can you imagine what would happen if everybody in the country could save 40% of the utility bill? What a game changer that is. But these things are happening all over the place, and it's very, very exciting. That brings me to my current obsession. And at its optimum efficiency, Congress moves at about 20 miles an hour. The world's moving at 100 miles an hour. So I'm trying to figure out how we can make policy when things are changing so quickly and make smart investments. Here's an example. A lot of people think that high-speed rail is a no-brainer. Chinese are spending millions on it. Western Europe has it. Japan has it. But we now have cars that can drive themselves perfectly. They'll be on the road. Actually, they are in some ways on the road. Which means in 10 or 15 years, we'll have cars that can drive themselves perfectly at 200 miles an hour. you have a car that can drive itself perfectly at 200 miles an hour, why do you need a high-speed rail? Why would you go on somebody else's schedule? Just get into your car, program your destination, have a beer, or a nap, whatever, and you're there in the same amount of time, leaving from your house instead of going to the station. So, point being that 20 or 30 years from now, high-speed rail may look like the dumbest investment we ever made. And if you look at the transportation field, the energy field, education, healthcare, things are changing so quickly. I don't know how in the world we can keep up in terms of making policy. I'm on the Energy and Commerce Committee. I'm on the Communications and Technology Subcommittee, and we have jurisdiction over all communications stuff. Well, the Federal Communications Act was first enacted in 1934. There are still provisions in the law that were part of the 1934 Federal Communications Act. There is not much today that resembles the communications law of 1934. I mean, broadcast radio, I guess, is probably the only thing. The last time Congress reauthorized the Communications Act was 1996. Well, the world's changed radically since then, and it's changing radically every day. So how in the world do you legislate or make rules in a world like that that is changing every day? That's, my obsession, and I've suggested to our leadership that we create a future caucus, or a caucus of the future, where we bring in futurists just to tell us what's on the horizon, what's being worked on. There is a researcher at U of L who has developed a blood test for cancer, to detect cancer. All types of cancer, various stages, so forth. He's tested it on 50 people, a wide range, some with cancer, some not, different kinds of cancers, and different stages. It was 100% accurate. Now, if that proves to be the case, again, that's a game changer. That will absolutely disrupt everything we've done with cancer. It'll add a lot of expenses because everybody will be getting a test and probably some treatment that may or may not be effective. But again, these things are happening every day, and that makes the role of Congress, I think, a very, very extraordinarily challenging one. So, kind of with that background, and because I'd rather talk about what you want to talk about, answer your questions, I'll stop and we can have a discussion. Yes?
I have a question. How do you, with the EPA losing a lot of funding in 2015, how do you foresee the new 111D provision playing out? Do you have any anticipations about that?
Well, I really don't. It's hard to tell. Most of what we've heard out of EPA is that the thing that will suffer the most won't be rulemaking, it will be enforcement. And that's pretty alarming when you look at, for instance, our track record in Eastern Kentucky with mining and those kind of environmental impacts. But I don't think the rulemaking itself will be effective. They're going to issue a new methane gas rule emissions thing sometime, probably in the next few weeks. But they're going to be cut, and the attacks on EPA are not going to stop. I mean, Mitch has said that's one of these areas of emphasis. He's going to try to incapacitate the EPA, and in the House, that's what they're trying to do on a daily basis, both limiting their statutory authority, trying to defund as much as they can, and that's unfortunate.
When you were talking about Solyndra, just to put it in perspective, the 500 million or so, it really only represented 3%. The program itself was 97% successful. I mean, there were a few others, but the money was recovered. In that case, it wasn't. And one of the things that I know that technology, seen it and so forth and purchased it. It just was very expensive. It was very high tech. It was very good technology, just very expensive to compete with PV, your typical.
Right. And, thanks for pointing that out. And actually, the program has already turned a profit. It's about $5 or $6 billion. It's already in the black. So there's that part of it too. And there's actually some thought that eventually a lot of that money for Solyndra will be recovered because their patents are still potentially valuable. Yeah.
Mr. Hamstrom, what's your thoughts on initiating legislation in the Senate?
I'm sorry.
If you're hamstrung, what are your thoughts, or what's your approach on initiating legislation?
Well,
in the Senate?
obviously, I'm not going to be able to do that.
Why not?
Because they won't let me do that. Those are the rules. I mean, we can and would look forward to working with senators to write companion bills. And we've done that. I mean, one of the few bills I've been able to pass since I've been there was a bill that I actually involves technology and created something called the National Center for what's called Digital Promise, National Center for Advanced Information and Digital Technologies. And it basically creates an entity to use private funds, like the National Science Foundation, use private funding to fund research and how to use the latest digital technologies in the classroom and on job training. And I've actually carried the ball for a group called Digital Promise, 5 foundations, Carnegie, Hewlett-Packard, and others. They asked me to champion it, so we got it passed in the House, and then we went to Ted Kennedy when he was still alive, and he helped us get it through the Senate. So there's a lot of that working back and forth. But, again, I can't introduce it all. So. Yeah.
A lot of both renewable and efficiency projects today are funded or justified by the tax credits, both the business investment tax credit, 30%, and the residential tax credit. Those expire in 2016. So it's up to this Congress if we're going to extend it. What's your perspective on that?
Well, I worry a lot about that. Yeah, what I saw with the wind, first of all, the fossil fuel industry is by far the #1 funder of campaigns and issue-related advertising. I just saw something this morning, I think, that they spent in 4 years' time $1.2 billion on PR, which are the ads you see for building Keystone Pipeline and that kind of thing. It's all from the American Petroleum Institute. So with all that money, and then that's apart from the contributions made directly to politicians and to parties, and they've been one of the biggest funders, as everybody knows, Koch brothers and others, to conservative and Republican efforts. So that's a lot to overcome. I should back up. What they say is we can't pick winners and losers. Therefore, we can't subsidize wind, solar, because we're picking winners and losers over fossil fuel. Well, first of all, we pick winners and losers every time we cast a vote. That is the most empty rhetoric that you could possibly use. Every vote we cast picks a winner and loser. But I think our policy ought to be, as the Republicans said when they were in the minority, we need an all of the above. Well, we do need an all of the above. And if we're going to promote wind and solar and biomass and hydro and so forth, right now, some of them need a subsidy to stay on their feet while they become competitive. But they will become competitive. There are more people employed in the wind industry now than there are in the coal industry. So, the payback long term of the tax credit and so forth today, I think, would be significant.
On that same subject, there is this debate out there that sustainable renewable resources are being subsidized. But we know that the fossil fuel industry is being subsidized. So why isn't the debate about subsidization of the fossil fuel industry?
We raise those points all the time. You know, the problem is that, well, when I was growing up, and some of you in this room look like contemporaries, when I was growing up, there were in Louisville two television stations, 2 newspapers owned by the same company, and a couple radio stations that did news. So everybody had the same information. You know, sometimes it was wrong, but everybody had the same starting point on any particular issue. And now we all get our information in so many different ways and go so many different places that we may be screaming that point out all the time, but not many people are hearing us. And that's really the problem. That's another whole speech I give, is about the fact that everything we're dealing with right now, all the issues we're dealing with, are pretty complicated. If they were easy, we wouldn't be dealing with them. And we don't know how to have a thoughtful national discussion about complicated issues. Healthcare reform is the #1 example of that. And I was involved heavily in all the debate over that, and still am. And 30 years ago, the average soundbite on television news was 43 seconds. Today it's 9.8. So it's kind of hard to talk about complex issues in 10 seconds. You could say death panels and government takeover and socialized medicine, but you can't really communicate about complexity. Yeah.
What do you think is going to happen to the Energy Policy Act, 2005, 179D? Do you think it'll be extended in 15 and beyond?
I'm sorry?
The Energy Policy Act, the tax deduction for energy efficient buildings?
I'm not confident with this Congress that those things are going to be extended. It's going to require an awful lot of grassroots energy to overcome the objections of the deficit hawks and the other industries that they're being disadvantaged. So I'm not optimistic about that. On the other hand, you've got, presumably you'd have a lot of home builders and other important groups that would be active in that campaign. So it'll be a big fight. But I think there is enough grassroots, there are enough people affected that could make a difference. Yeah.
Taking a little bit of a step back, what do you see as the prospects for campaign finance reform to help get some of this fossil fuel money and all sort of corporate money out of Washington? It seems like you have to be part of the problem in order to implement the solution, at least for a little while. Is there some sort of strategy?
I've been very, very heavily involved in those efforts to change the system. I'm part of a task force on election reform that the Democrats have in the House. I've introduced a constitutional amendment to overturn Citizens United. I'm an original co-sponsor of a public financing bill. But right now, none of those things have any prayer of passing with Republicans in control of the House and Senate, and Mitch McConnell, who is the #1 enemy of any restraint on spending in the country. So I don't see much hope of a statutory change. Now, here's where I'm optimistic. I think the market's going to take care of it this way. Right now, more than 50% of all TV watching is done on a recorded basis. And that's increasing fairly rapidly. In any one campaign, only about maximum of 15% of the voters are in play. In other words, the other 85% have already made up their mind. So you're talking about these enormous expenditures for television advertising that are only effective with maybe 7% of the people. So it's not a good use of money. Social media is going to be, and with many people, particularly younger people, millennials and younger, is their connection to the world. That's where they get all their information on their phones and tablets. So I see politics becoming much more of a social media than a mass media proposition. Social media basically is free. So I think people are going to, over the next 10 years, there's not going to be a need for as much money and as much TV advertising because it's just not going to reach anybody. And the most effective way to reach people is going to be through social media. Now, that's not going to change the fact that there's still people spending a lot of money on lobbying. And we won't do anything about that. But I think the huge sums of money that are being poured that we saw this last year, I think that's going to, the market's going to reverse that. It's my prediction. We'll see. And television now has become, you know, young people don't watch television at all. Generally speaking, people under 30 just don't watch much television. People who watch TV the most are seniors. They're now the second largest demographic group in adopting social media, seniors. So all the trends are moving away from kind of the conventional way of political advertising into different ways of communicating. And that's, I think, going to help control the money.
You talked about a balanced portfolio for energy as a solution, and the notion that we really need policies that have an all-in. Really, an all-in balance is another way of saying middle. So my question to you is, whose job is it to get Congress, both houses, to work a little bit towards the middle?
Well, first of all, I resist the notion of middle, right, left. Because I think it's hard to define what middle, right, left is, and I don't see much evidence that there is a middle in this country. I think there is a huge segment of the population, by far the largest segment of the population, that just wants things to work. They're not ideological on any particular issue. They won't say, well, healthcare is a perfect example of that. So if you were, first, you know, Obamacare is Romneycare. That idea came straight out of the Heritage Foundation, and that was one which many of us thought was the wrong approach. And while I still think that Obamacare is a vast improvement over what we had, and will prove to be, it's not, I don't think it's the best answer. I think we need to go to a single payer system. Medicare for everyone or something like that. But we never had that debate. So where was the middle on healthcare? It's hard to figure out where they would have been. They don't like Obamacare, primarily because it was Obama. Also because there was a concerted public relations campaign to misinform people about it. But anyway, I just don't, I look at all the issues we have, and right now, the individual mandate in Obamacare, that's the whole thing about personal accountability. That's why Romney loved it when he imposed it in Massachusetts. So I'll give you another just anecdotal evidence. So this is years ago, 15 years ago or more, and I was part of a group that bought a dinner for 12 at an auction, a charity auction. And we had the dinner, and there were three of us we had gotten this discussion of politics. There were three of us who self-identified as liberal, and 9 who self-identified as conservative. Denny Crum was in there, and there were all the other people were outdoors people. They hunted and fished and so forth. So I asked the question, why do you consider yourselves conservative? I said, what do you mean? I said, well, do you think that corporations ought to be able to exploit the environment and resources without any concern for the future of the planet and so forth? I said, God, no, of course not. So do you think anybody who's injured or sick has the right to quality medical care, affordable medical care? Of course we do. Every one of them. Do you think every child has a right to a quality education? Of course we do. So why do you consider yourself conservative? And they had no answer, but they were just comfortable thinking of themselves as conservative. And I don't know what liberal, conservative, or moderate means anymore. None of that is responsive to your question. The question is
going to be my next question.
The question, I will characterize your question in a different way, is how do we compromise on issues? And that's proven to be very, very difficult. Here's part of the problem. I was part of a group of 8 that in the last Congress spent 7 months working on immigration reform, comprehensive immigration reform, bipartisan group, 4 Democrats, 4 Republicans. Every day we were in session, we met. We made policy exactly the way you would think rational people would make it. So let's say we were talking about an employer enforcement provision, how to make sure that employers are hiring only people eligible to be hired. So we'd say, what if we do it this way? Well, if we do it that way, then I lose this group and I lose that group. Well, what if we do it this way? Yeah, I might be able to sell that. I mean, it was just day after day of that kind of conversation. At the end of 7 months, we had a bill that 7 of the 8 of us signed off on. And 1 Republican would refuse to, but he only disagreed with one little, actually just a word choice. So we were able to do it. Now, the reason we were able to do it was because we did it in secret. As soon in this environment, there is what I call the advocacy industry, and it's MoveOn.org, and it's Heritage, and it's Club for Growth, and as soon as you stray 1 inch from the perfection that they seek in you, all of a sudden you're getting hundreds of emails, people saying, I'll never contribute to you again, I'll never vote for you again. People will say, we'll run a primary challenger against you. It's this constant outside, and then the media as well, that make it very difficult for people, because the media expect us, and I play in this game, the media expect us to be total advocates when we get on there. That's why we get on television. If we go on television, and I go on MSNBC and I say, well, on one hand, then on the other hand, they won't be asking me back. And certainly on Fox on the other side, that's the same way. So I think that's the sad state of affairs, that right now we can't compromise because the outside world won't let us. I mean, I've had numerous conversations with people in our own delegation, Republicans in our own delegation, about subjects, and I'd say, don't you think we can do this, or you could vote for one of these things? And they asked me, and I said, oh yeah, good. But they never do. And again, it's because of the fear of the outside world.
One more question.
I just had a question about what do you hear in Washington about the sudden drop in oil and the impacts currently and toward the future, so to speak? Because one of the things is the lack of revenue from the taxes, like the state of Louisiana that's not getting the revenue that they were getting, and jobs and so forth.
Yeah, I'm not sure everyone, right now everybody's thrilled that their constituents are paying less.
Right.
Forget this. But there is a recognition that there are a lot of negative consequences to prices this low. And whether it's the economy of North Dakota, which has basically gone from boom to, not bust, but they're certainly struggling now. States like Louisiana, in foreign affairs, it's a huge disruptive factor. Venezuela's been helping to finance Cuba. Their oil industry is getting slammed, so they aren't able to help Cuba, which makes a burden on Cuban people. Russia certainly loses a lot of its leverage. Iran is suffering terribly. They're on top of the sanctions that the world has imposed on them. Now their revenues are way down. So their people are struggling, inflation's off the charts in Iran. So there's and of course, the OPEC nations now are much less formidable because of this. So there are geopolitical consequences as well as domestic economic consequences. So there's a lot to talk about it. And now, just in the last couple of days, you had people saying, even the Saudi prince said, oil will never be $100 again. And I think everybody's kind of waiting to see where the price settles before we actually think about policy implications. Right now, everybody's observing, but people are very, very much aware of how potentially disruptive this is. It entered a little bit into the Keystone Pipeline today. They have, I think it's about an $80 break-even point for the tar sands oil, and that's 40. They're not even going to pump it. Well, anyway, first of all, just let me thank you all for your interest and concern about sustainability, and we've got a lot of people who are working on this, you and many others, and certainly we all should be concerned about it. And I just, I'm glad that Morgan was here, because much of the progress that's going to be made is going to be made at the local level and state level. And again, we move too slowly in Washington, but whatever way we can help, we're going to continue to try to help. Again, with sustaining some of these tax credits and loan programs, and hopefully we can get some of that done. But thanks for having me here today, and you're going to have a great, productive conference.
It's not often you get a United States Congressman to spend 45 minutes and open up like you do, but it shows your support for what we're doing in your Commonwealth. Progressing very well. Thank you again. It's my pleasure now to introduce Eric Evans at the American Cancer Society Cancer Action Network, and also with the Smoke Free Kentucky Initiative.
Hi, he said I'm with the American Cancer Society Cancer Action Network. I'm one of the lobbyists. We also have a large coalition made up of mainly the American Heart Association, American Lung Association, Campaign for Tobacco Free Kids, Kentucky Chamber of Commerce, Kentucky Smoke Free Policy are our main partners, and we have a lot of others, Hospital Association, Kentucky Medical Association, are working with us as part of a group, and that's the coalition that he speaks of. James Sharp was a scratch this morning. He's actually at a legislative meeting, so I figured that people in Louisville would know what a scratch meant on that. So again, my name's Eric Evans. What I would like to discuss with you is a law that we're trying to pass, and we've been trying to pass for 10 years, and I think I'm preaching to the choir here, but that's why we're here, is because it has been a hard law to pass, and Morgan and Congressman Yarmouth couldn't have made better pitches for why to advocate, and that's why I'm here today. And I'd like to thank them for being very supportive of all of our issues and being they both sponsored all of our American Cancer Society initiatives, as well as the Kentucky Smoke Free Coalition. Morgan was actually one of the sponsors for the bill. Now, why would we want to do this? Louisville has a smoke-free law, so here, a lot of us don't already have that luxury. But there's only really about 30 cities or counties that have smoke-free laws, and some cities have them, the county doesn't, stuff like that, which leaves about 65% of our population uncovered with the smoke-free law. The media likes to call it smoking ban, but basically all we're doing is just having people leave the restaurant, go outside. The smoke-free law is a law just like in Louisville, where you can't smoke anywhere that's a public place, which is pretty common sense to most people. But why we're doing it is because in Kentucky, there's 8,900 deaths from smoking every year. 950 deaths just from secondhand smoke. People aren't smoking. Smoking indoors causes a normalized behavior. Kids come in, they see people smoking in restaurants in most of the state, And I think, well, that must be okay. And then, it also keeps people from quitting. And really the people that we're really trying to protect are the people that are in those diners, those waitresses and waiters and cooks that have to be around secondhand cigarette smoke for 14 hours a day a lot of times for, working, in restaurants. Even, industry, we get a lot of people that are working in factories that are afraid to say anything because, their superiors smoke or, stuff like that. So this law is one of the best ways that we can help business too. That's another caveat to it. Besides the fact that if we keep our kids from smoking, keep them from seeing this normalized behavior of people smoking indoors, 119,000 kids in Kentucky right now that are going to be smokers are going to die. So, we need to do something about this and something fast through our state government. As far as monetary costs, why it's so good for business, why the Kentucky Chamber of Commerce is really supportive of this law is because it saves us all money. We spend, the state on annual health care expenditures, the state spends $1.92 billion on smoking-related causes. State Medicaid program that's coming right out of our pockets, $598.8 million. The estimated annual health care expenditures in Kentucky for secondhand smoke alone is $128.4 million. So, smoking caused productivity losses in Kentucky, which I know many people probably deal with that, and in your businesses, people get sick because they smoke and they're, you lose productivity there for a little while when they have to take off work. In Kentucky alone, that causes $2.79 billion worth of loss. So that is obviously the main reason businesses are supporting this bill. And it's just, right now it is a nonpartisan bill, believe it or not. It's not we've talked about a lot of partisan causes. This is nonpartisan. The sponsor for the bill is, last year was Representative Susan Westrum. She's a Democrat in Lexington, and then a local representative here. Now she's a senator, Julie Rocky Adams. And those were our two sponsors last year. But it is one of those laws, it's going to cost, we need a tremendous amount of grassroots energy, as Congressman Yarmouth pointed out, to get things done. It's not an issue where our legislators have obviously voted it for yet. We've been working on this for 10 years. So it's going to take people out there like you that have influence over them. Every constituent has a lot of influence, whether you know it or not. By telling them your personal stories, people that you know that have been exposed to secondhand smoke, might have had harmful health effects, or somebody just lost to cancer or heart disease. You could have maybe had an impact with them. If this law hadn't passed and they hadn't, grown up smoking, stuff like that. I passed around some handouts, kind of our general messaging, and what you can do to get involved. I'd like to point out February 11th is our lobby day. If this is an issue you're passionate about, you might have other issues. Don't worry, you can lobby your senator and representative about health laws as well as business laws too. They won't mind. But February 11th from 8:30 to probably 1, or actually 9:30 to 1. We'll be doing lobby day where we'll go to see our senators and our representatives and just talk to them about the smoke-free issue. There'll be hundreds of people there, and it's a really fun day if you'd like to, go to the Capitol, experience our Capitol, and advocating, hands-on for a cause. I'll pass around a sign-up sheet that you can sign up on if you'd like, and we'll get you in the system. If you've already signed up with us, some of you might get our emails. You're already registered if you've done that, but you can register online too. The Kentucky Smoke-Free Kentucky address on those handouts. it's one of those things where, and Morgan quoted, once you're running for office, all you want is change, and once they get in office, there is no change. So what we need from people is just, everything you can do. Those personal calls that Morgan was talking about, how he does listen to people when they call in, even emails. If you get an email that's a foreign email, as he said, write a personal message in it. If you feel, those things only take about 1 minute, and they can be impactful. Mention somebody that you lost to cancer and how this law would, in their honor, be a great way to, help save lives in the future.
Okay. A couple questions? Over here, Jim.
A couple of comments. I remember when Louisville was trying to pass the smoking ban up here at Louisville, I called the then mayor for my papers, and I said, look, I know all the numbers about health, but I said, there's a total different number. And I said, you folks, you and your buddies at GLI do not understand. When you have somebody come in from the 75 or 80% of the rest of the country that lives under smoking bans, and the first thing they do, they walk out, and you've got some gap-toothed yahoo that's lost half his teeth and most his health, and you walk in a convenience store, and he's smoking away like a freight train. Those people are going to pack right back up and go back where they came from. And I've never heard that argument made. It's all this, I think, and the other thing I would mention is you got two people, one from Louisville, one from Lexington, then you wonder why can't they get rural votes. I would remind you that Dr. David Watkins, my Henderson, is my state representative. David's a doctor. It's real simple. He's seen enough. All these numbers, he doesn't need them. So I'm all for it.
Well, that's a great point. I really failed to mention that as far as businesses, they're trying to locate from out of state. When they come in the state and see everybody smoking, it really makes an impact. We've heard that. And Kentucky Chambers really tried to make that a point when they were speaking about it. But yeah, David Watkins is actually going to be one of our sponsors. He's always sponsored that bill. He was actually the first person to propose a statewide smoke-free law. So the only reason why we have those two legislators on there is because they tend to bring a lot of votes with them. And certainly Representative Watkins will be.
I think there's other branches, not the legislature anymore. Dan Majordo, he said, folks, I've seen every time he has a kid come in.
Yeah, and he was a nose and throat doctor, and he saw it firsthand in rural Kentucky. You're exactly right.
Yeah, one last question.
How do you overcome that? The argument I heard was there should be local control.
Yeah, that's a great point. And that's the largest that's the argument that we're hearing now. Really we've worked on the local laws for over 50, since Lexington went smoke free, and it's not working. It's going to take another 20 years. So we need to do this now. The cost savings is now, and it's something, and this live saved is now. So it's really time to be. This year is the year to do it, and hopefully, people will look at this and go, it's one of those issues where people are out there. We poll it, 65% of people are for it, but if they just don't feel like compelled enough to call their representatives or senators and tell them to pass this.
We're going to have time during lunch to cover some of these other issues and ask additional questions. His comments today about costs and stuff reminds me of last night. Frank and Colleen and I were able to go see Robert F. Kennedy Jr. speak at Transylvania University, and he was full of facts and figures that I can't recall all of them, but the cost of generating traditional fossil fuel electricity might be 11 cents here in Kentucky, cost consumers 11 cents per kilowatt hour, but the real costs are trillions of dollars that are going into healthcare and other issues. And he talked about the information highway, our interstate highways, that as a country, we decided to support those kinds of efforts that have changed our lives. I had in 1995, I had a cell phone bill of $10,000 in 1 year for a client that I was working on. Now it's $30, $40, $50 a month. So things are changing and we need to do something. So I think all of these speakers have done a good job today of stimulating the ideas. And at the close of our session here, we're going to suggest ways how you can get involved and actually help us make a difference. It's my pleasure to introduce Tom Medley at Harshaw Train. He's Vice President of Business Development. He's joined Harshaw Train in the Contract Solution Business Leader in 1998. He's currently the Vice President, as I said, of Business Development. Prior to joining Harshaw Train, he spent 18 years with Honeywell in various operations, sales, and leadership roles with a primary focus on developing and delivering energy-rated solutions for building owners. Tom's commercial and industrial career began as a factory representative at Westinghouse with a commercial air conditioning division supporting distributors, contractors, and building owners and large tonnage applications. Tom is a graduate of community college at Allegheny, Pittsburgh, as well as the University of Southern California and the University of St. Thomas Global Management. For those, I don't know if he's going to get into much of what Harshaw Train is, but they are an energy services company. It's grown to $100 million a year and just a fantastic company. And he's here today to talk about the EPAC.
It's on your website. Well, good morning. I have two questions to start with. First, how many people here have had to actually lobby for a piece of legislation to pass? A lot. Well, good. So I'm a conservative. I'm a Republican, so don't hold that against me because I try to live balanced. I try to live in the middle. But this EPADS, and that's what I'm going to talk about is EPADS, which is so the second question is, in Kentucky we call it EPADS. Nationally, it's called PACE. Yeah, Performance Property Assessment for Clean Energy. How many people are familiar with that effort? There's 30 states currently. Okay, a lot. Good. Well, so right out of the gate, we had to call it something different because clean energy was going to be a lightning rod to attract votes. Now, being a conservative, I've been lobbying for this bill now for 2 years, working with Greater Cincinnati Alliance and Prosper on Todd. But I've had the fortunate role of anytime we get to meet with a conservative from the Republican Party, that's fallen on me. And so those have been fun meetings for me to say, no, I'm one of you, but trust me, this is a good bill. And I usually get about 2 minutes in, and I can't quite get it accomplished, but so far so good. So to start with the ask, I'm going to end with I'm going to begin with the end in mind. The ask here is that you heard today, sending an email, making a phone call, they are very impactful. And if you support this legislation, it's House Bill 100. If you're in support of the effort, please do that. Reach out to your representative and let them know that you support the bill. So I gave you a handout here. I'm not going to be able to cover all of it in a short period of time, but let's talk about some key points. First of all, what is it? EPADS is a very attractive way to finance energy projects. I mean, put in a nutshell, that's what it is. It enables anybody that's in the tax roll, and that's predominantly commercial and industrial, but it's also not-for-profits whose property assessment value is in the tax roll, like not-for-profit healthcare can also use this. And essentially, it allows the building owner to finance energy improvements, it can be energy efficiency or it can be renewables, over up to 20 years with a tax-exempt interest rate, because the local taxing entity, the municipality, in this case in Kentucky, the sheriff's office, allows the financing of the energy project to be funded through a third-party lender, a bank, bond issuance, and there's a number of companies very interested in providing the financing. And the loan is repaid via the municipality, which acts as a conduit. So it really becomes a municipal conduit to access tax-exempt financing that is paid for via the property assessment bill. So what's really cool about that is a couple of things. First of all, as I mentioned, it's tax-exempt. Now the gap between tax-exempt and taxable financing right now is relatively small, but it's still significant on large projects, and over time, that more likely will grow back to being a large gap. The cost can be spread out over 20 years, where typical bank financing for an energy project is going to be 5 years, 7 years. High-end performance contracting business with guaranteed savings. If you have deals that are upwards $500,000 plus, you get lenders to go out 10 years, 12 years, 15 years. On the public sector, local government, K-12, local government agency, state government, Fed government, this is not applicable and it's not needed. Those markets, they can go out long-term financing, tax exempt notes, but in the private sector, that's a real challenge. So going out to 20 years is a big plus. You can generate some really nice cash flow for a building owner. So benefit number one, if you're a building owner, you can generate cash flow out of this initiative. That is where the savings are greater than the payments for the program. So it's a self-liquidating debt that can spin up or spool up cash flow. Number two, and this is the really big one that is a game changer, the debt stays with the building. So as a building owner, I secure that financing. I'm going to secure that financing based on my credit. But when I sell that building, that debt goes with the building. That debt doesn't stay with me. And so it doesn't, as an investor, it doesn't tie up my access to capital or my limits of capital. I mean, let's face it, the number one barrier for the C&I market for energy efficiency, energy savings, is the financing, is taking on the debt. Whether I'm building solar panels or I'm trying to lease space, I'm also at the same time probably carrying a significant mortgage. I want to make other investments, and I'm generally going to make those investments in my core business. Having better space, having more attractive, having more space, more square footage, or the capability to manufacture more components. And I have a tendency not to want to invest in things like energy, although I know they're important. So one of the things that I've seen in the last 5 years is you no longer have to go and talk to clients about the importance of energy savings. Now the discussion is all about how, and how am I going to pay for it. And so with this notion of the debt staying with the property, that really opens up the capital investment. Now, one of the key challenges is that the mortgage companies, the first mortgage holder, has to agree to it. Because just like the property assessment tax, it takes priority in the pecking order of who gets paid what. The financing for these projects also has to take priority in terms of lien rights. Now, very large lending institutions, JP Morgan, Fifth Third Bank, the list goes on, they've signed up for this. Now, they signed up and said, yes, we'll consent to that. We're very interested in financing. So it's great that the very lenders who are lending money for mortgages also have an interest in lending money for the EPAD or for the financing of the projects. Why else is it a good win? Obviously, reducing energy. Everybody wins with that. It's a big job creator. It improves the value of the buildings. And let's face it, I'll tell you, it's happening now in New York, it's happening in San Francisco. It's just a matter of time it will happen here. Is that soon buildings will be required for them to be sold. They will have to identify and present their energy density per square foot, just like restaurants have to post a report card. And so this notion, this ability to be able to sell my building, to invest in it, and sell my building, it's going to become a requirement for that building to be energy efficient. Those savings will be passed on to tenants, so the tenant can win, the building owner can win, and so on and so forth. There's some diagrams in there of how it works. Essentially, a building owner goes to the tax assessing agency and asks permission to do it. And really the only qualifier is they have to get the consent of the first mortgage provider. The government agency is really not funding this effort. All of the costs to administer the program are also paid for from the savings. This creates a job opportunity. For example, in Florida, when this was executed, Florida is just one of 30 other states that have done this. They created 3 districts. The state divided itself into 3, and then they came together and they hired a third-party administrator. So the third-party administrator does all the work for the taxing municipality. So there's no additional government jobs, there's no new taxes, there's no requirement for anybody to do it. It's purely voluntary. And when one building owner decides to do it, it does not affect the property tax or the tax of their neighboring building. So it's purely a voluntary program. So the big questions I've gotten about the pitches is, why should government do this? Well, my answer is because they can. Because it facilitates economic development and creates jobs. It improves the value of buildings. It attracts businesses to the state. States that have this legislation, it's a great way for an investor to buy a building that needs repairs, like a new HVAC, new lighting, new windows, new roof, or has an interest in solar. It enables them to come buy that property in Kentucky, make those investments, spread it out over a long period of time, spool up cash flow as a result of it, and everybody wins. So my answer is, it's just like economic development. It's all for the same reasons. That's why government needs to help facilitate this.
Questions?
Yes, go ahead.
How much taxes you talk about losing, and aren't these all local governments? I tell you the reason I asked this. I went down when they had the budget. There was a meeting at their budget meeting at the council. And I had one particular item I was looking at. There was 40 to 50 people from different nonprofit groups. And these groups that they all get their money from local government. And they were the ones that were taking care of needy women and needy children, trying to get people in poor houses to get them insulated. And they were getting cut. It's all because we have these tax breaks like this. So yeah, I thought this Democrat was 50 years.
Yeah. It's not a tax break.
You're basically taking something that the money that goes for this, that means that these women don't get help.
Go ahead. Yeah, no, there's no tax, there's no incentives, there's no tax rebates. The program is 100% fundable. My building, I changed the light bulbs, my energy.
Taxes, that means something's got to get done.
No local taxes are used.
What taxes get done?
There's no tax. The only thing that gets cut is energy consumption. And then the savings from the energy pays back the loan.
Yeah.
Government agency is purely a conduit.
Maybe this question will clear it up. So what entity is eligible to provide that financing? So I work for a community development financial institution in Appalachian, Kentucky, and we have an energy efficiency program and we help financing. So as a CDFI, would we be eligible to put financing into this program?
Well, you'd probably be eligible. I mean, anybody that wants to loan money can loan money, but there's going to be a lot of competition for that, is what I would say.
And my second question to that is, do you see a third-party administrator? Is there some entity on the horizon, and who might that be?
Well, Greater Cincinnati, well, it's Greater Northern Kentucky, Alliance for Energy. They're one of the primary sponsors. That's why, if you go to the last page of this document, we have opened it up for members to join this initiative. You can read what the costs are and what the involvement is. So yes, that organization, who is one of the sponsoring entities, just like Warshaw County, they have an interest in providing that. So if you're an energy service company in the business of selling energy solutions, yes, you should have an interest. If you're a company that has an interest in managing these programs, then yes, that's a business interest.
As you described it, no tax impact.
Correct.
Grants and financing market. What is needed to be authorized by state legislation?
Yeah, it's great. It's a great question. Why does the state have to authorize this? Well, the state has to authorize the use of the tax roll. In the today, the property assessment or the tax roll is exclusively legislative for that purpose only. So this bill enables that to happen. Also, all these agencies, every municipality is a standalone municipality, every county, every sheriff's office. This bill also allows them to organize in groups and co-fund the initiative. It also enables large bond pools. So Ross Sinclair has joined as a member. Ross Sinclair is a very largest bond entity in the state of Kentucky. They have numerous programs where they're accustomed to creating bond pools. So what's a bond pool? Well, one of these agencies, this assessment district, sums up $10 million worth of projects over a 3-month period, and they go out into the bond market. And you understand the interest rates associated with that. The administrative costs are all compressed. It just makes the financing costs even lower.
One last question.
We have about
Look at you because you stood up.
We have about 21 people here from the Louisville Sustainability Council. Maria Cutter looks like she just cut out. I was hoping I could mention this beforehand. And many of them are from the Green Economy Action Team. We talk about the eco districts in Nulu, downtown Louisville. You're familiar with that, I'm sure.
Yep.
We understand that West Louisville is getting ready to go through its own fair share of redevelopment. Hopefully, if all things continue the direction they're going. Can you speak a little bit about initiatives in Kentucky or in Louisville or in anywhere getting this legislation passed would help the people who are in this room who are trying to push this locally? What kind of impact it would have, or can you just speak on that?
Oh, yeah.
The relationship between what could be and how to get it done?
You know, I mean, first of all, the #1 barrier to energy projects is financing, bar none.
It's not a matter of technology. It's not a matter of interest. It's not a matter of the ability to cash flow. It's the financing. And who carries the debt?
Follow the money.
Follow the money. This eradicates that problem. So I look at 30 states that have passed this legislation. The progress has been relatively slow going. And it's slow going because generally it's the municipalities, it's the taxing entities. So once this bill passes, nothing happens until one of the sheriff's office, the county says, I'm ready, I'm open for business. And that's going to be the bigger challenge. Getting the bill passed is only step one. Step two is, how do we get the municipalities to engage? How do we rally them to do this? What's their motivation? How do we get them to commit? They don't really have to invest. All the costs are covered. There also needs to be this flow of money. So we talked about having an entity that manages the program. So if I go to 30 counties and I say, I'm going to help you come together, I'm going to help you generate this program, how do I get paid to do that? That's all pure investment. So those monies have come from different sources. So when this bill passes, and it's very likely to pass, because I think right now we do have good bipartisan support, we got to find a way to really drive momentum. And the momentum is by having the consumer saying, I want it, I'm ready.
So can we do, is there anyone in this room today that would say I'm on board for something like that? I mean, is there anybody here that's thinking that direction?
You're not. You've got to be talking to them. I mean, there are a number of organizations that are in favor of EPAD. I mean, the Green Building Council, for example, I think the KCA and Solar, those societies are all supportive, but the people that really have to make the change, you've got to do this first step, and then it's up to, does Louisville want to be the first one to do it, or Lexington, or Bowling Green,
Northern
or whoever.
Kentucky. Northern Kentucky's hot for
You got 120 counties to choose from.
Well, and again, what we're here today about and to learn about these issues is to activate members in this room, your employees, people in your community and your churches to go out and say, call your legislator. To answer Jim's question, if somebody will actually loan the money to you, you can do energy efficiency or solar. But the banks today are very reticent to loan money because they've got mortgage payments, they've got life, sometimes they lose their job. With this bill, once passed, then there's outside financial entities that will actually put up the money instead of a bank, to put up the money so that they can be guaranteed they're going to get a return because it's going to show up on your property tax bill. So if you're paying $500 a year on property tax, you add $300 or $500 a year to your tax bill, and that solar or that energy efficiency is paid for over a period of time. But if you lose your house or you sell your house, sometimes people don't do it. I'm only going to be in this house for 3 years. So why would you invest something that's a 7 or 8 year return on investment? And in this case, do it because your house value is going to go up. So when you sell it, somebody else is going to take over that liability, but you're going to get more money for what you did in the first place. So we need to move on with the agenda. Thank you so much, Tom. 12 minutes left, and we titled this particular section as Legislative 101, and I just wanted to give you just a short amount, kind of an overview of this legislative session. It convened on January 3rd, so last week, or January 5th, or 6th, I think it was. So it convened for 4 days and then recessed for a period of time. They elected leadership last week, and both chambers considered some legislation, but they recessed on Friday. Now this session will reconvene on February 3rd. On March, and go to about March 6th and 9th will be the last days that the House and Senate will consider whether to concur with the other chamber on several pieces of legislation. Then there'll be a 10-day veto time. So they adjourn, and there's an opportunity for the governor to consider, do I let this go through and make it law, or do I veto that particular law? Then the members of the General Assembly will come back on the 28th, I think it is, and they have 2 days to decide, are we going to try to override the governor's veto? And if they do, then that prevails. What we're going to do after this meeting, we've got your email addresses, is we're going to send you some background information. We did see a lot of number of hands have actually done lobbying before, or advocacy before at the legislature, and that's good. We need to get more people involved in that particular process. But we're going to send you information about how to find your legislator, etc. We already heard today from James about the smoke-free Kentucky initiative, where there's also going to be on February 5th, the Kentucky Sustainable Energy Alliance is going to have a advocacy day on February 25th. The U.S. Green Building Council is going to have an advocacy day. All of these groups need you to come, or tell a friend or a business associate that we need your help in that. And our role with Kentucky Sustainable Business Council is to keep you engaged, keep you knowledgeable of what's going on, because we do need, as Morgan said earlier, a phone call, an email makes all the difference in the world. They tend to just kind of rely on campaign contributions and those interests, but what does motivate them are voters, and people make the difference. Now, you heard the introduction of Frank Knapp earlier from Heather, and we had to adjust the schedule accordingly. So it's actually fitting that Frank is going to come up here and tell you about his work in South Carolina, ASBC, and other things related to this. Frank?
Well, I'm Frank Knapp. I am the President and CEO of the South Carolina Small Business Chamber of Commerce. I'm also the co-chair of the American Sustainable Business Council. It's a national organization of over 70 business organizations that works towards sustainability. My organization I co-founded back in 2000, so I've been doing this for a while. We are not a true, solely organization that deals with sustainability. We cover a wide array of different businesses. What I do with the American Sustainable Business Council is I have 3 states that I work with personally. I work with North Carolina, West Virginia, and Kentucky. I can tell you that Kentucky is far and above organizationally than the other two states. So congratulations to Heather and Bobby and Colleen for putting this all together. This is the first organizational meeting of the Kentucky Sustainable Business Council. I hope you haven't lost track of that because of all the great speakers that come up. But the reality is, you are here because you are interested in sustainability. And the voice that has traditionally been missing from that has been the voice of business. So how many here represent businesses? Good. How many of you here have that membership form in your hand? How many here do not have a membership form in front of you? Everybody has a membership form in front of you? I'm serious. I'm not leaving this room. And so I know we haven't answered that question. Because every one of you needs to be a member of this organization. This organization to succeed needs every one of you to be at some level of a membership. There's even a free membership, for God's sake. There's no reason for you not to do it. Okay? But they would appreciate, of course, somebody. If you're an organization, a nonprofit, you're represented here, join the organization. You can put some dues out there, great. If not, just sign up for the basic membership. That's fine too. It is important that the voice of business be recognized by the legislature, members of Congress, and by the public in general, the media, of your support for issues that address sustainability. Now I counted 11 bills that have been pre-filed. How many of y'all looked at all the pre-filed bills? Or all the ones that have been filed? Everybody?
You read them last night.
Well, I did it last night. Okay. And until I found 11 that pertained to this whole issue of sustainability. There needs to be a business voice making a decision whether they're going to support or oppose or not take a position on those bills. You can make a difference in this legislature, but you've got to support a business organization to do that. And so, if everybody here, seriously, who does not have a membership form? Okay? Can somebody please call me, get this gentleman a membership form? I really don't want you to leave today without filling that out. It is important. This is an opportunity that we don't have to have Heather and Bobby and Colleen call everybody up after this and say, hey, you didn't leave your membership form. You're here, do it. It only takes a few seconds to do this, but it is important. Yeah, I went to the meeting last night where the Robert F. Kennedy Jr. did speak. You know, and he said, look, we should not be about putting limits on the future aspirations of the next generation or the generation after that. We always, most people, want to do something and leave things better for their kids, right? And their grandkids and the next generation. The business community needs to have that responsibility also. That it's not just about profits. It's about taking care of people. It's about taking care of the environment. That we should not be so greedy that we want to accentuate our good times today and our profits today on the backs of our children and our grandchildren. And that's what sustainability is all about. And there are some great organizations here that represent environmental groups or other organizations, and that's wonderful. But the business community that believes in sustainability needs to stand up and be heard. And that's what the Kentucky Sustainable Business Council is all about. So I encourage you to fill out those forms. It will take but a second and leave them at the front desk. It's important, and I applaud each and every one of you for being here and answering the call. And these keep going.
Questions?
I will be lunching, and I'll be taking any questions about what we're doing in South Carolina, what we're doing at the national level with the American Sustainable Business Council. We can go over all that at lunch.
I'm going to let Heather close out. But one thing that Frank said before you leave, to fill out your membership form, that's very important. But please also, there's a survey on your desk. If you don't have one, raise your hand and Colleen will get you one. It's very important to hear what you're interested in helping us with, what you thought about this program so we can improve these things in the future. With that, and you can always check kyspc.org and we're going to be sending you some information. With that, I'll hand it over to Heather to close out.
Again, this was a great meeting. I thank you all for coming, and I wanted to kind of tell you how this is going to work now. Like once you leave today, what's going to happen next? So the next steps will be, as Frank mentioned, and all of us sort of dipped our heads, have you gone through the pre-filed bills for legislation? The whole point, and one of the points of this organization is so that you don't have to do that. That's what we are going to do. He's identified 11 bills already that we need to watch. There are some other fantastic groups that we're going to work with to help us perform those actions. And then we will reach out to you in the most concise way we can to summarize what we think needs to be paid attention to and what we want to do about it and how we're going to do it. So we won't be bombarding you, but at least once a week you will be getting an update. If legislation moves sneakily like they have in the past, we might send out a midweek email as well. But the Kentucky Conservation Committee, and Lane Boldman's here, and I'm going to go ahead and let her start walking up, is going to be one of the actual lobbying arms that will help us sort of monitor what's actually going on. We are an advocacy organization. We do not directly lobby politicians at this point. So we will be utilizing Kentucky Conservation Committee and some others, Kentucky Resources Council. If most of you have all heard the name Tom Fitzgerald, and we will be utilizing him as well because he's a very valuable resource for all things environmental to our state. So that's sort of how this will go. Like, we will be the advocacy group. We will be the business voice that will connect with people that are the lobbying arm to make sure that things are getting done effectively. That may grow and evolve as we move forward. One of the important things on the survey that you have in front of you is that we need to build a steering committee for this group that's going to guide our policy focus for the organization. Things we feel can be moved forward during a legislative session, things we want to focus on, and things we want to build strength behind. So pay attention to that, and please let us know if you'd like to be engaged. And I'm going to give Lane just a minute to talk about KCC, and then lunch is outside. If you did not register for lunch, but you decided you'd like to stay for lunch, please let us know. We have about 15 extra for people, and we'd like you to just go ahead and stay. It's not that big of a group, and we'd love for everyone to keep talking today. So this is Lane Bolden. She's with the Kentucky Conservation Committee.
I really want to thank Heather for putting on this. I think it's tremendous to see the business interests in sustainability, and particularly in legislation. So as Heather said, they are a 501c3 nonprofit. A lot of you are in organizations that want to do more direct lobbying, but you don't have the right tax structure for that. So KCC is a partner with Heather and other organizations to handle that part of the monitoring of bills and taking positions on bills to help you out. So we're a partner with Heather. So as you have concerns with particular legislation, contact Heather, she'll work through me, and we can work on direct lobbying for you.
One last thing. So I want to thank everyone. You as a business owner can go out and lobby yourself for something that you think is important. What we're doing is going to help facilitate, here's issues that we think are important. We may take a position, we may not, but we say we think this is important. The key is getting involved. And last but not least, I want to thank three other people. You've heard from Heather, Heather and I, Colleen Crum, is Colleen around? Okay. And Deborah Payne and Shelley Beazle. It's Beazle or Beazle? Beazle. All three of them worked extremely hard. Heather and I couldn't do this without those three, and let's give a round of applause for them. Go now get your lunch. Again, we've got extras. Just let us know. And most important, if we come back, go to the restroom, whatever, for about 15 minutes. About 11:45 or 11:50. What we want to do is start kind of a dialogue. We've got a couple people here that have some programs like USDA. I'm going to give her 2 minutes to explain some programs, how you can get financing or get government money to help you offset the cost of these, and a few other things. And then Breaks will come back up to answer questions, and really others that may have stuff that they want to talk about. So it's 11:30. Thank you so much.
There's Christmas cards out in front, and all it has in the back of it is our website address. We encourage you to go to our website. There's more information on the subjects we're talking about today. We will have another session probably in March. We will email you all about. And so there's more to come. Thank you very much.